Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another episode of Dirtnation Off-Road. So today what we're doing is talking Toyotas, and we're talking one Toyota in specific. This back here, this is our 1988 Toyota Pickup Winchers. Now this truck, if you guys are newer to the channel, this is probably the truck you've been seeing me use for the better part of 6 months now. If you've watched previously, you've seen that we wheel the Tacoma. I still wheel the Tacoma, but anyways, pretty much what I want to do for this video is, because we've been using Winchers for the past 6 months, I've gathered a lot of data, a lot of opinions, and I've learned a lot about these Toyotas and how to wheel them, how to build them, and everything like that. And I kind of just want to share some of that information, kind of do a walk around of the truck, talk about some of the things that we've done in the last couple years and the major upgrades that we've made recently, and kind of where it's at and where we're going to go with the truck in the future. Now, fun fact, Winchers is actually my very first truck. I bought it about 7 months before I bought the Tacoma, and I ended up pretty much buying the Tacoma because of this. But when I first bought this truck, it was pretty much stock with a body lift and 33s, and then from there I only put on 35s, and then we've kind of been using it. It was open diff, the stock 3.0 engine, and then had the automatic transmission. I mean, there wasn't really a lot going on with the truck. It was just go out, have some fun with it, and do everything like that. Then I bought the Tacoma, and from there we started to build Dirtnation and use the Tacoma, and the Tacoma has become the monster that it is right now. And then in the background, Winchers has sat for the past couple years, up until about a year ago when we finally finished a motor swap. And then from the motor swap, we used it a little bit, then did the straight axle swap, and then from there it has been party time. It has been this truck's time to play. So like I said, we're going to do a quick walk around on the truck. We're going to talk about some things, and then we're going to talk about the future, and then we'll go from there. So let's get to it. So first thing that I want to talk about is the engine, because the engine became kind of a huge upgrade for this truck, and I actually have some more plans of what I want to do in this engine bay. But first things first, this came with a stock 3.0 3VZE, I want to call it, which is the stock V6. It was the first year of this V6, and those engines are notorious for blowing head gaskets. So if you guys have one, just know it's probably going to blow a head. It's usually number 6 cylinder on the driver's side. It was no different with me. We actually took it out to a trail, blew the head gasket on it, and then from there I had planned a motor swap. The truck sat for a little bit. We started the engine swap, and it actually took us around 9 months to actually finish the swap. But once we finished the swap, the engine runs pretty darn good. The only thing I'll say about it is, because I'm missing a couple of the smog things, I'm missing an O2 sensor, and I haven't hooked up the OBD2 ports. Like, there's a couple things that are just details that I've missed on it. It runs good, but it also runs rich, and it's a gas hog. But for what I need it for, which is crawling and low end power, this engine is great. Now also keep in mind, this motor has over 250,000 miles on it, and it came out of a 96 4Runner. Now that truck, or that 4Runner, sat for about 7 or 8 years before this motor was pulled out. And when we pulled this motor out, it was complete junk. I had to do some pretty, big time gasket changes and rebuilds, obviously timing belt, everything that you want to do on a motor when you swap it in. I did a lot of those things. Didn't really touch the bottom end, just did a whole gasket rechange and everything on the top end. And since then, this thing's running tits. It's doing really good. I beat on it. I don't really worry about it because I know these engines are a dime a dozen. So I know when that time comes to swap this again, I'm not going to have a problem finding another motor. Now for the future with this engine, I do plan on supercharging it once I can find a used supercharger to kind of rebuild and kind of go from there. That's definitely something that I want to do for the future, because although it has enough power to crawl, it doesn't have enough power to bounce and climb some of those really steep hills that I want to climb. Now, that's not just the motor's fault, that is also the transmission. And that's the other part that I'm going to talk about right now. The transmission is kind of a problem because it's the stock automatic transmission, and this thing does no favors for the stock motor. It does no favors for this motor. It's kind of a crappy transmission. Although I'll say it is reliable, it can take a beating, but the power transfer and everything like that, I'm just not a fan of it. Now, the other problem with that transmission is the transfer case that is hooked up to it is the chain-driven transfer case. The thing that you typically want to do with those transfer cases is swap them out for a gear-driven transfer case, which is going to come in like the 22 REs. You can swap those into this, but the problem is you want to have a manual transmission in order to do that. I think you can do it with an automatic transmission, but I don't know if it's this one or you have to use a different one. That's still some research that I'm doing on my part. But pretty much what my plan is, I do want to supercharge this motor, and then probably before that, I want to swap in a V6 manual transmission, adapt the gear-driven transfer case from a 4-cylinder Toyota, and then probably do dual cases, so that at that point, when you have double low power plus this motor, I'm going to have all the power I need to climb any hill that I want. But other than that, I found this 3.4 to completely transform how this truck drives. It's got plenty of pep, especially like considering that I drive with 37s, and this motor is like, it's really clapped out. Like, it's got some miles on it, it's got some beatings under its belt, and this thing runs just fine. It fires up, it goes, and when I need it to climb a hill, it'll climb a hill. But I just want to change some things with gearing as well as the transmission to get it a little bit better. And then we'll throw on a supercharger to give her all the power that she needs. And then last thing, we did do a full video breakdown on the engine swap. So you guys can check it out right here. That way you can kind of see what we did, because these swaps, although they're very straightforward, there's some pretty specific directions you want to follow, like with accessories that you use and what engine and changing things around and wiring and stuff like that. We talked about a lot of that stuff in that video, so check it out if you're interested in doing a swap on your own. So next, what we'll talk about is kind of the whole reason this truck is this truck and why it's so special, and it's this straight axle. Now honestly, if I'm going to be straight up with you guys, the straight axle swap on a Toyota is probably the most important upgrade you could possibly do to it. If you guys have an 86 to 95 pickup or 4Runner and you like to rock crawl, you like to off-road, the straight axle swap is worth the investment. For me, this straight axle swap ended up costing, I want to say, let's see, it was like $600 for the axle, probably about $1,500 for the SAS kit, and then another $1,000 and like paying somebody to weld and doing some other stuff, buying that stuff. It was probably between, I don't know, I want to say between $2,000 and $3,000, which is a lot of money, but for what I ended up getting out of it and how capable this truck is, it is 100% worth it. Now, to do my SAS, what I ended up buying was I bought the Trail Gear IFS Eliminator kit. I got the 3-inch heavy duty springs model, which originally came, look at how my leaf springs are all bent. You guys can tell I use it. Jesus, you don't want this with your leaf springs. I'm gonna have to straighten those out at some point, but besides the point, the leaf pack that I originally bought, 3-inch heavy duty, it came with 7 leaves total, and it caused the truck to have kind of a Carolina squat, which it was way high in the front. Now what I ended up doing was I took out the very, very bottom leaf, and then I took out probably, I think it was the 3rd or the 4th leaf, the one that wraps all the way around here. That lowered the truck quite a bit, and not only did it lower the truck, but it allowed it to flex so much to where the front end on this truck is kind of ridiculous. It flexes better than some Jeeps. I'm just gonna say it. It really does. I've been super duper impressed with the articulation on this truck since doing the SAS. Like, I'm still, even 6 months later, I'm still getting used to how flexy it can be, how sideways and how off camber I can get this truck and it still be safe. Super duper impressed with that. Some of the other things that the kit does come with, it moves the stabilizer steering up here so it's away from rocks. It has a gusset for the axle, which is, you can see I welded it. It says Winchers on there. Comes with front armor. Comes with full rebuild kits for your knuckles. You have 12-inch shocks, has a shock hoop. This whole has a whole kit that you need to swap an axle in there. And we also did make a video on this, so in addition to the engine swap video, we have the straight axle swap video, which I will also link below so you guys can check that out, because I get super in detail with the straight axle swap and the problems that I ran into and some of the things that I had to deal with. Honestly, it wasn't a very hard process. Just make sure you do your research on it and you can knock this out within a week or two. Now, some of the other upgrades that I've made to the front end is, you can see right here, I no longer have ball joints, I have Heim steering. So this is actually 7/8 Heim steering, and by the size of these Heims, it's pretty much 1-ton steering. So this stuff is strong. Now, there is some drawbacks to this kit. Now, I got this from Rough Stuff. Rough Stuff, if you're listening, you guys need to do a little bit more research so you can notify people about some of the problems that I'm running into. Because first and foremost, let's show you right here. You see that? That's because the steering arm right here smacks on this bottom steering bar, this steering link right here. When it's straightened out, it'll hit the Heim right there. Now, I'm working on a solution for that. The problem is it ends up eliminating some of your articulation. So when this tire comes up, it pretty much hits the bottom of the steering arm. And at some point, either the steering arm is going to shear or it's going to break the steering box. Obviously, I don't want that. So I'm working on some solutions myself. When I come up with a solid one that I can like share with you guys, I'll definitely do that. But for now, I'm wheeling it as is because it still does work. And these bars are so damn strong, like it's really thick steel. They're not gonna break or anything like that. So I'm not too worried about it, but it is what it is. Also with this kit, I got grade 8, bolts and everything, but these continue to come loose, especially on this one, on the steering arm. Maybe it's just steering with 37s and doing everything like that, but this one continues to come loose after every couple trips. I have to tighten it. So that's something, if you guys have Heim steering, always check your bolts. If you feel play or you feel clicking or anything like that, it might be a bolt that's loose and you just have to tighten it up real quick. I know that it's usually this one that comes loose. Some other things in the front end, people will not approve, but I do have 3-inch spacers. That's because the straight axle that comes on the stock straight axles is actually more narrow than the IFS width. Now, the problem with that is because I have an IFS axle in the rear, it's a wider axle. So in order to match up, I had to put spacers on. So I have a 1.5-inch spacer in the rear and a 3-inch spacer in the front, because that'll even it out to where now the truck has some decent width and it's kind of even when the tires are lined up. Now for the future, what I plan on doing is the hubs on this truck are the stock straight axle hubs. But what you can do is the IFS hub conversion, because this was an IFS truck, the independent front suspension, I kept the hubs from there. So you pretty much have to take those hubs, you clean them up, you have to cut the outside edge of them. We'll definitely make a video on this when I actually do it, but pretty much look up the IFS hub conversion, and what it does is it actually widens the axle naturally to where you don't have to run a big spacer. So you could probably get away with maybe a smaller spacer or do more of an offset on a wheel plus the hub conversion, and then you'll have the same width that I have right now without running a spacer. And then the other thing to talk about is the knuckle. So the knuckle that I'm using is actually the stock one that came with the axle, and most people will upgrade to what they call the 6-shooter knuckle. And then the reason it's called a 6-shooter is you can see the stock one has 4 bolts on the top, which those tend to, under pressure and with a lot of wheeling, they will get loose and they'll shear to where you'll completely lose your steering. Now, some people upgrade to the ones with the 6 bolts on the top. I am going to do that in the future for sure, but because the IFS Eliminator kit came with a full rebuild for the stock knuckles, I'm using the stock knuckles as is, and when it breaks or when I get the time or if there's downtime on the truck or anything like that, then I will upgrade this part. But for now, it is working just fine, and as long as you make sure to tighten those top bolts, you should be okay too. So I always occasionally check those after every couple off-road trips just to make sure they're not loose, so that when I'm turning and doing everything like that, I don't break anything. Front diff is 529 gears. I have a front air locker. Now, I absolutely love air lockers. Most people with their rock crawlers, they typically will put a Detroit locker or they'll weld the front end or put a spool. I think that's okay for the rear, because you can still drive around. Yeah, you're gonna skirt tire and you're gonna around corners and stuff, but the front end, it's so nice to be able to turn under pressure because you can just turn off your locker. That is super important to me. You can also go with an e-locker, but e-lockers are more expensive and they're a little bit harder to find depending on if you go with like a stock Toyota e-locker or if you go with an aftermarket one. Air lockers are just so simple. It's easy to set up air in your engine bay. You can see mine right there. It's kind of just resting right there. I trade off that air compressor between the Tacoma and Winchers. No big deal, but an air locker is awesome. Most of the time, I don't even need to turn on my damn locker because this truck flexes so well that one of these tires is touching the floor. But it's just so nice to be able to turn off your locker so that your steering box gets saved from that wear and tear of being locked up and having a hard time turning. And then lastly, our axle shafts, which you cannot see, those are the chromoly Longfield Burfield axle shafts, which come from Trail Gear. These are the strong ones. I mean, I've bounced this truck around fully locked. I've given it gas in situations where normally it should break, and these things have not broken, because I've seen them proven with other trucks that you know, when you put those axle shafts, you're solid. You can get away with murder. So I highly recommend that if you are rebuilding an axle, spend the money on the Longfield Burfields, because it is worth every single penny, because it strengthened these axles so much. I mean, people call them mini 1-tons, and they're not incorrect. These are kind of mini 1-tons. Like, think about it. I'm running a 37-inch tire, and these axles handle it just fine. And that's 6 months worth of abuse to prove that. Now, plans for the future, as I mentioned, we're going to upgrade the steering knuckle to the 6-shooter. We're also going to do the IFS hub conversion, and then that's pretty much it for now. I mean, do I want to link it? Do I want to do 1-tons? Yeah, I definitely want to do those things. Maybe do like a hydro assist on here. There's a couple things that we can do down the line. I think for now, I'm good with this axle. We'll continue to use it and abuse it, and if we start to have problems and consistent problems, then we'll look at upgrading from there. But for now, these axles do great, and I'm going to continue using them. It's crazy that, you know, a 7.5-inch ring gear can hold up to all this abuse. I'm pretty sure, I mean, I've seen them break before. That's probably the first thing to go, is either going to be the hub or it's going to be the ring gear inside there. But you know, that's what happens sometimes. I'm not even tripping about that. But these axles are strong, they're solid, and we're gonna keep using and abusing. So moving on to the side, tires, 37-inch, 13.5 wheel on a 17 wheel. So those are the old Tacoma wheels. You guys might have seen these back in the day, these methods. These things are solid, good wheels. We got our driver, I guess. Rob is doing his thing, but these tires, I actually picked these up used, and you can tell, like, these things have been through some stuff. These are, but I mean, honestly, Toyos are solid tires. I got no problems with it. Back ones are super chewed up. We got cracks in them and everything like that, and that's from the rear end, because it's locked. It going skirt, 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 back and forth, but whatever. We'll go to the rear end in a second. The thing I want to talk about over here is sliders. Now, these sliders that I got, they're actually technically steps that I went and had welded on, and you can kind of tell with this damage that we have right here. Shout out to Themo, the homie, for spotting me through this line. Now, it wasn't his fault that I hit this. It was the fact that the slider was not very strong, because you can see how much I bent it with these weak little bars. Doesn't have very good support, doesn't have a kick out, but it was what I had at the time. I got these for like 50 bucks, and I got 50 bucks worth of slider, that's for sure. But these are welded on, and I mean, they honestly do the job. It's just like really big hits where right there, where it's going to cause you a nice putazo right there. Now, something else to mention over here with the straight axle is the drive shaft. So that was something that I had a huge problem with in my straight axle swap video. If you guys watch it, definitely do some research on your drive shaft stuff, because I ended up trying to make a square tube drive shaft to make it cheaper, but because I screwed up the first time, I ended up having to make another drive shaft, which would have cost as much as making a good drive shaft in the first place. So either make the square tube drive shaft the cheap way, but do it right so you don't have to spend that much money, or just go get yourselves a legit drive shaft. Because the reason you don't want to use a square tube drive shaft is because once you lock the hubs in the front right here, this thing rattles like a MFer. And obviously when it rattles and everything like that, that's going to wear out your pinion bearing, that's going to wear out the transfer case bearing. There's a lot of stuff that it can wear out, but most of the time that's off unless I'm off-roading, so this doesn't really rattle. But it is what it is. It's typical for Toyotas to do the square tube drive shaft. Just make sure you do it right and consider your options before you actually make the decision on it, because I screwed up in my video and it ended up taking way longer than I wanted to and made it way more expensive to get this truck on a trail. All right, since we got Rob in here, let's talk about the interior a little bit. Not much going on in the interior.
So we got custom alligator skin dash. We got an overdue oil change, and best of all, we got the sponsored sunroof by Monster.
The Monster sponsored sunroof.
Yes, and it comes off in sections like Jeeps.
It's a T-top.
Yeah, there you go.
T-top.
It's a 2-section part.
Yeah.
Dude, this is badass.
This is kind of a making it work situation. You know, the radio kind of sucks. The AC obviously doesn't work.
I think the only thing that works are these little quarter mirrors or quarter windows.
These do work actually. Yeah. And other thing that's matching, matching cracked rear, you know, side mirrors. Look at cracked and cracked. Like, keep it consistent here. Cluster, nothing on my cluster works except for gas and like it tells me if it's in 4-wheel drive, but speedometer, tachometer, all that shit doesn't work.
That's all you need.
I have an aftermarket you know, temp gauge, which is right there. That also doesn't work, but I gotta go get that O'Reilly's warranty special.
It doesn't go above 25, so you're gonna be okay.
Anyways, yeah. We got our transfer controls right here. Now, obviously, I want to do a manual swap on this because the automatic is garbage. That's a nice way to say it. It's garbage. And for these trucks, you want to have a manual transmission, and you want to have all the sticks right here to where you can put it in 4-low, triple low, quadruple low, and this thing will kind of just walk up every obstacle that you wanted to. I still have the ECT controls, which is cool for towing. You know, when I'm going to tow my boat or something.
Your yacht.
Which is all cool. My yacht. Anyways, that's it for the inside.
Where's your cup holders?
Oh, that's a thing. There's no cup holders.
Where's your cup holders?
It sucks.
Bro!
It's absolute garbage. There's no cup holders.
Wow.
Usually my cup holder is the person that I bring. Usually. So, shout out to them. It's either my son or those other people that I bring. Shout out to them. Very good. Good old cup holders. That's it for the front. So let's move on to the rear end of the truck. This is kind of where we've made like the most like gentle upgrades. We've done some small things that have done some, you know, big improvements to the truck. Most recently, we actually did the bob. So you can see right there. Normally, this is longer all the way out to here. So we took and chopped the bed at 2 ends, and we took a whole foot off of the bed. Now, I didn't record a video on that because the people that I was working with, I just wanted to make sure to get it knocked out. I didn't want to hold us up. We had to get it done before a certain time. So I didn't really make a video on it, but it's actually pretty simple to do. There's a lot of write-ups on different Toyota forums where you can find what to do. Normally they say to cut 11 inches. I cut 12 inches because I looked at it and I thought I could get another inch out of it, and I was right. But the reason you want to do the bob is you can see right there, your departure angle is delicious to where you're not really going to hit much unless you're hitting stuff from the side, which is kind of why I have that. But the whole point is to where you're not getting hung up on stuff when you drop down or when you climb a hill. So the most back thing on the truck is the shackles right there. So that's real nice. And then speaking of shackles, the other thing that we did, which was a big upgrade, was the Chevy 63 leaf spring swap. Now this one was actually fairly simple to do. Took a couple of us like a whole afternoon to kind of get it done. And pretty much what the process involves is you gotta get a set of 63 leaf springs. You can get them from Silverados. A lot of the full-size trucks in the Chevy lineup carry these. You can get them from junkyards, super cheap, 50 bucks, 100 bucks for the set. And then you want to pick up the actual leaf spring swap kit, which will come with the shackle, come with the weld-on piece right here, and then it'll come with the weld-on piece over there. But pretty much what it does, you can see that's the old leaf spring bracket. It moves it back right here, and then you can see the length change from right there to right there. Normally you're supposed to cut these off. I didn't cut them off. I'll do it when I have a chance or when I want to. But because you have longer leaf springs, it provides a much better ride and a lot more flex. Because the front was already flexing pretty good with the straight axle swap, but with the 63 swap, this thing is ridiculous with flexing. Like, usually they say linked vehicles flex the best, which they do, but I'm getting pretty much the most I can out of a leaf sprung vehicle because this thing really flexes good. Definitely impressed with it. And then getting a look underneath, you can see the longer leaf springs, which are nice and flexy. Now, usually for these trucks, you want the shocks mounted either in the bed, like way up there, and both of them facing the same way, or you want them kind of angled to where they'll go from right here towards the center. Now, I actually have the bar that you weld on so you can relocate your shocks to kind of pointing towards the middle. It's a little more favorable for flexing and rock crawling, but with how I have it set up right now, it actually flexes pretty good. I have some 10-inch shocks in the rear, and they're kind of in the stock position. So I ended up using the stock U-bolt plate and the U-bolts, and then the top I use the stock mounting points, and it actually works pretty well with this setup. Now, I had to do some work to get there and kind of do some Mickey Mouse stuff, but for how it is, it actually works pretty well. But eventually in the future, I'll get those relocated with some longer shocks so that we can get even more flex out of these leaf springs. And then on this side, it's all the same except for just the beatings. So this is our most recent beatings and trip to Parker. We got a video on that coming real soon. You guys can see all the carnage, but we got all this new stuff, as well as we got ourselves a nice door dent, and then we got ourselves a nice fender dent. Good times. Now, it is a shame that we hit the door because we actually have some tube doors on the way, because tube doors are actually very beneficial for rock crawling because you can lean your head out a little bit, kind of look at the tire, you know, helps you spot yourself a little bit, kind of see where you're pointing your tires rather than pointing your head out up above here. You can lean out a little bit more. So tube doors are cool. Those are coming in probably this week, so you'll see us install those real soon. And then some other upgrades planned for the truck. I'm gonna get some reinforced sliders, obviously, because these ones already went bent to shit. I'm also gonna be working on getting a cage. Now, when it comes to a cage, I haven't exactly decided if I'm gonna go interior or exo cage. Exo cage obviously protects a little bit more. It protects the body, but I like the look of an interior cage a little bit more. But the only problem with that is because I'm a big human being, if the person that builds your cage doesn't really do it right, you can end up hitting your head inside here. I've seen some people have to wear helmets when they have a cage, but we will be doing a cage for sure. Most likely doing an interior cage, and then we have some seats to actually throw in with some 5-point harnesses. That way we can eliminate the stock seat belt and we can have like a little bit safer options, keeping us in place as we're bouncing this thing around and rock crawling and probably rolling it someday. So it's all good. So that's pretty much it for the quick walk around on Winchers. Obviously, you can see we've gotten a lot done with this truck in the last 6 months with upgrades, with wheeling, and it's still a relatively fresh, relatively new build, and potential wise, the sky is the limit, right? We've only done a couple things, and they've been some key things and some pretty, you know, strategic upgrades in order to make this thing really ready for wheeling, but there's a lot to be done, and I definitely look forward to doing that in the future. Now that we've gotten kind of the walk around of Winchers out of the way, what I want to do is start making a comparison video, or maybe a series of comparison videos between this and the Tacoma, because I think there's something to be said about building an old truck versus building a new truck, because there's benefits and drawbacks to each one. And the fact that I've now built 2 trucks and I'm in the middle of building 2 different trucks, I think there's some good information that I can throw out there to you guys. So if you guys have any questions on that, definitely comment them below, because we're going to be making that video in the near future. So definitely look forward to that, as well as if you have any questions about Winchers itself, any of the things that I've done to it, check out the videos below. Also, you can always throw a comment, you can shoot a message on Instagram, you can do all that stuff, and we're here to answer those questions and give you the help as best as we can. But we are all done here. I want to thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Patreon. You also hit us up for shirts, hats, hoodies, and all those other goodies at dirtnationoffroad@gmail.com. We're all done here. Let's get it, guys.